Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this new Fellows Admissions Day, one of the high spots in the Academy calendar. So even though it's slightly damp and grizzly outside, it's Wimbledon weather, it's going to be warm and very celebratory inside because we're here to celebrate the talents and achievements of a number of distinguished people. If I can introduce myself, I'm Robert Lechler. I have the privilege of being the president of this academy. And I know that not all of you will know everything that you might like to know about the academy, so let me very briefly introduce us to you. We are the independent body in the UK representing the diversity of medical science, and our mission is to advance biomedical and health research and its translation into benefits for society. We've recently refreshed our strategy, and I'm sure copies of that new strategy will be available for you if you're interested. But if you care to read it, you'll see that we've committed ourselves to the following: to secure a future in which, number one, the UK and global health is improved by the best research. Number two, that the UK leads the world in biomedical and health research and is renowned for the quality of its research outputs, talent, and collaborations. Three, to ensure that independent, high-quality medical science advice informs the decisions that affect society. And fourthly, that more people have a say in the future of health and research. So that is who we are. But before we get on to the main business of the afternoon, which is the admission of the fellows, let me, if I may, make a few remarks about the year past and looking ahead. And I'm going to put those remarks under four headings, and I shall be very brief, I promise you, under each of them. The first one is some comments on context. And I doubt if anybody in the audience would wish to disagree with the following statement, that the last year has been one of unprecedented turbulence in the political environment in which we operate. So it started almost to a day a year ago, when this meeting was held a few days after the referendum result on leaving the EU. So it began with that, and the very day, the 24th of June, when we got that result, I woke up with a rather heavy heart and had to go straight off to Israel on behalf of the Academy to talk about UK life sciences. The only thing anybody wanted to talk about was Brexit. Then came the US election, again with a rather surprising result and a somewhat unpredictable occupant of the White House now to respond to. Then, of course, there have been the very distressing terrorist attacks in Manchester and London. And then when we thought everything was settled down, an election was called to create greater stability. And that isn't exactly what happened. So that was the political scene, and within that political context, a lot of churn has been going on in terms of the structure and the shape of research funding. So the Higher Education Research Bill was passed on the last day of parliamentary business before the shutdown for the election campaign. That means that UK Research and Innovation, the new agency sitting over the 7 research councils, now is coming into existence. The Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund has been established. The industrial strategy the government is committed to has a very prominent component of the life sciences strategy in it. So there's a huge amount of change to adapt to and to make work. And it's crucial, therefore, in the midst of this turbulence, that we contribute as an academy to providing a clear and consistent set of messages to government to ensure that UK biomedical research continues to perform at the outstanding level that it has done and to thrive. So that's the first set of comments about context. The second comments are just to reassure those of you engaged with the Academy that the Academy is responding to and engaging in those challenges as actively as we are able to do. And so focusing initially on the Brexit challenge, the 4 academies, and I should say that the 4 national academies are working, I think, better together than they ever have done to date. The 4 academies have had a chance to meet with David Davis, the Minister for exiting the EU, twice, and we're also part of Joe Johnston's Brexit working group. And I think we're each speaking the same language. When I talk about these sets of issues, I talk under 4 Ps, and those Ps are people, by far the most important of the four, in my view, and I think the other academies, and I hope you would agree with that we can create a future or ensure a future where we can continue to attract the world's best talent to come and work in the UK and retain our continental European colleagues currently working with us in the UK. The second P is partnerships, so that's collaborative activities with other countries, not least Europe, and not only Europe, and I'll come back to that. The third P is pounds. That's the money aspect, not the most important, but it's important that we get our relationship with EU funding streams optimized as we move forward. And the final P is permissions. That really is regulation, but regulation doesn't start with P. So regulation is about ensuring that we harmonize our clinical trials regulations as far as possible with continental Europe, but also to continue to consider the agility dividend that Brexit might afford us of positioning ourselves as the go-to place for early phase trials, where the UK is probably better than anywhere else in the world for intelligent regulation. So one other remark in relation to the European issue. You may not have heard of something called FEAM, which is a Federation of European Academies of Medicine, but it exists, and it's run into a little difficulty recently in terms of leadership and staffing, and so we volunteered to provide support, and indeed were allocated £250,000 by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to support the FEAM office, and so we're now doing that, populating that office in Brussels. Now, to be part of FEAM, you don't have to be an EU member country, so we can continue to be part of FEAM, whatever happens with Brexit. But I think it's a particularly attractive set of developments at the time that we're trying to secure and strengthen, indeed, our relationships with Europe, that we've been able to take on that role with FEAM. And the final aspect with FEAM is that our current Vice President International, George Griffin, has just been elected as the next president of FEAM, so that gives us another connection. And the European Academies feed into providing advice to the Science Advisory Mechanism in the EU, which adds to their significance. So that's what the Academy's been doing in relation to Europe. My third heading is briefly about opportunities, because we seek to be an opportunities-orientated academy. And I think there are some exciting opportunities in front of us, not least because we continue to have a government that is committed to research and science and R&D. And that was evidenced by, several months ago, the government committing an additional £2 billion per annum to its funding of R&D. And you'll notice in the manifestos of the major parties, all of them committed to raising the total level of R&D spend in the UK up to the OECD average, because you may know that despite our extraordinary strong performance, we have been underfunded. And Joe Johnson just yesterday in a statement to Parliament recommitted to that manifesto commitment, and we will work to hold the government to that commitment. I think that the life sciences strategy component of the industrial strategy is also an opportunity, and it's great that in terms of the industrial strategy being rolled out, probably the first cab off the ranks will be the life sciences component of that industrial strategy, with which many of you in the room, I'm sure, are also engaged. And core to that has been a past president of this academy, John Bell, and I think we should all thank him for the sterling work that he's doing in shaping that. And this strategy will be coming out for consultation, we think, in July, and has many really positive recommendations in it. And then the third and final point under opportunities is that if I'm looking for one positive dividend out of this Brexit process, then perhaps it is that it's made us put more energy and focus into international partnering than historically we've done. We've realized that we are such an international community and that our international links are so important. Never have I been more conscious of that. And so I think that there may be fresh ways of strengthening international partnerships, maybe fresh funding arrangements, even partnership funding with funding agencies in other countries. And just as one example, Helen and Liz Bohm from the Academy and I went out to visit the US equivalent, the National Academy of Medicine, used to be called the Institute of Medicine. A number of you will know the president, Victor Zhao. And they were very enthusiastic about the idea of joint working with us, and so much so they're coming back on a return visit in December when we'll discuss things that we can do together again to strengthen our international links. So my fourth and final heading, before I close these remarks, is just a word about the new strategy I referred to a moment ago. So essentially the new strategy in large part is just an evolution of what we have been doing, and I think that's entirely appropriate because I think the Academy has been doing the right things for a number of years and doing them very effectively. So much of it is just an evolution onto the next stage of our journey, but there are some new initiatives in it, and I wanted to mention those for your interest and indeed subsequently for your critical comment. So the first is to develop a new leadership program that we think will be unique, unlike anything else that's offered anywhere else, certainly in this country, if not internationally. And that's a leadership program to train people to work across the interface between academe, NHS, and industry. And it will do that by taking people onto the program from those three sectors and them going through a leadership training scheme together with deliberate immersion in the two sectors from which they don't come. And I think this will generate a cohort of people equipped to lead clusters, making those interfaces work to maximum advantage. So that's one thing that's under development, and Martin Humphreys, our current Vice President, Basic Science, is leading that. The second new initiative is a horizon scanning set of activities where we'll be going around the country doing horizon scanning with fellows, and indeed I hope some early career researchers, asking the question, what are the challenges that new technology and that science is bringing into our pathway that we need to get on the front foot and think about? If this had existed 2 years ago, then genome editing would be an obvious one that we would have found ourselves focusing on. So I think this will be a very energizing exercise. There'll be about 6 sessions around the country. It'll involve fellows from all regions and will inform our policy work going forward. Third new initiative, which kind of links in some way to that second one, is that we will be planning a small number, maybe 2 a year, of scientific meetings with a difference. And the difference will be that they will deliberately and explicitly bring disciplines together that don't normally work together. And so many of the challenges facing modern medicine, I think you would agree, require disciplines to work together that historically have not done so. And so we hope these meetings will catalyze exactly that. And then finally, we seek to further develop our voice, becoming a modern, accessible, and diverse academy, diversity in all its forms. So I'm very excited about the new strategy. I hope that I've communicated some of that to you, and will invite you to comment as we move forward with it. So let me then turn to today's main business, which is the admission of new fellows. This is so important because the Academy essentially is made up of its fellowship, and it's the fellows that make the Academy what it is. It's the quality of the fellows that give us the credibility and the authority that we have and the influence we have, and that's why it's such a huge privilege to lead it. Now, election to the fellowship, and that's particularly, I'm saying this for the benefit of family and friends who are here, is fiercely competitive. There are 380 people in the pool endeavoring to get elected, and we elect 46 fellows each year. And so today's new fellows are a very welcome addition to the Academy, and can I offer my personal congratulations to all of you. And without further ado, could I invite Professor Philippa Saunders, the Registrar of the Academy, onto the stage to read the citations. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. So without further ado, Professor Jane Appley. Jane Appley is Professor of Medicine and Chair of the Department of Haematology at Imperial College London. An internationally acclaimed clinical academic, she achieved her outstanding reputation in 2 fields of haematology: blood and marrow transplantation and chronic myeloid leukemia. Her leadership in the field of bone marrow transplantation established the importance of optimal patient selection, prospective clinical studies, and accreditation of transplant units. Her group have made seminal observations in CML, including the mechanisms of resistance to tyrosine kinase inhibitors and the discovery of the most important prognostic biomarker of early molecular response. Professor Jane Appley. Professor Dorothy Bennett, Professor of Cell Biology at St George's University, London. Dorothy Bennett has made an immense contribution to our understanding of cancer cell biology. She has made extensive contributions to pigmentary genetics, identifying many of the key genes and their functions. Her work on understanding the genetic basis of melanoma progression and susceptibility led Professor Bennett to demonstrate the important role of cell senescence in cancer progression. She maintains a high profile in a multitude of scientific support activities, founding the European Cell Senescence Association, establishing the Functional Genomics Cell Bank, and being president of 3 societies. Professor Dorothy Bennett. Professor Philip Bennett. Philip Bennett is Director of the Institute for Reproductive and Developmental Biology at Imperial College London. He has an international reputation as a leading researcher in human parturition, having discovered a series of events integrating endocrine and inflammatory signals. Professor Bennett established one of the first preterm birth prevention services in the United Kingdom, providing the framework interventions which have improved outcomes in women at risk of premature labour. He has worked extensively with industry to identify new targets in preterm labour, has led the creation of UK research networks for multi-centre studies, and influenced policymakers to improve the health of women and neonates. Professor Philip Bennett. Dr. Anne Bertolotti. Anne Bertolotti, a program leader at the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge, is leading research internationally into human neurodegenerative diseases. She has gained important insights into the role of protein misfolding in dysfunction and death of nerve cells. She uncovered the mechanisms by which superoxide dismutase mutations cause protein aggregates. Following on from her discovery of factors that are part of the cell's response to the perturbation of proteasome degradation, her recent work has led to the identification of an evolutionarily conserved pathway that controls proteasome homeostasis. These fundamental mechanistic studies are informing novel strategies to improve cell survival and reduce disease burden. Dr. Anne Bertolotti. Professor Andrew Biankin. Andrew Biankin, Regius Professor of Surgery at the University of Glasgow, combines surgical practice with cancer genomics and translational medicine. He is a driving force for personalised medicine for cancer internationally, and he plays leadership roles in international efforts in cancer genomics, such as the International Cancer Genome Consortium, where he is focused on translating and implementing genomic data. Professor Biankin is the chairman of the Cancer Research UK National Pancreatic Cancer Network and is developing UK-wide major initiatives in stratified medicine for cancer. His expertise in pancreatic cancer includes preclinical models, clinical research, and healthcare policy. Professor Andrew Biankin. Professor Sheila Bird. Sheila Bird is a visiting senior fellow at the MRC Biostatistics Unit in Cambridge. Never afraid to challenge conventions or undertake research in difficult situations, she has championed the use of statistical method in public policies ranging from transplantation through epidemics to prisoners' health. Professor Bird's research team was the first to quantify, validate, and meta-analyze prisoners' very high risk of overdose death soon after release, and to design Europe's largest prison-based trial for risk reduction. Work on the misuse of statistics and her BMJ series, Statistics in Question, transformed the quality of articles in medical journals, and she established the Royal Statistical Society's Awards for Statistical Excellence in Journalism. Professor Sheila Bird. Professor John Brazier. John Brazier, Professor of Health Economics at the University of Sheffield, is a nationally and internationally renowned health economist. He works closely with policymakers and analysts at the Department of Health and is familiar with national policy. He leads a team of researchers in the area of valuing health and well-being and oversees 2 large programs of research. He is Director of Research at the School of Health and Related Research in Sheffield and has a key role in shaping research that has led to the development of a highly successful set of impact studies. Professor John Brazier. Professor David Byrne. David Byrne is Professor of Movement Disorders Neurology at Newcastle University. His research on the cognitive aspects of Parkinson's disease and dementia with Lewy bodies has highlighted the burden of non-motor symptoms and established that cognitive impairment is a significant and frequent feature of Parkinson's. He has taken his findings into the clinic by leading trials and by contributing to improved treatment of cognitive disturbance in Parkinson's. Professor Byrne is the National Specialty Lead for Neurodegeneration and the NIHR Clinical Research Network. He is also the National Clinical Director for Parkinson's UK, where importantly he has established a Parkinson's Excellent Network. Professor David Byrne. Dr. Jason Carroll is Senior Group Leader at the Cancer Research UK Cambridge Institute. By developing and applying new genomic and proteomic technologies, Dr. Carroll has redefined our understanding of breast and prostate cancer etiology and drug resistance. His seminal studies identified a role for long-range regulatory elements in hormone receptor-driven genes that bind pioneer transcription factors. His group have capitalized on these studies, which are at the forefront of genomic exploratory biology, to develop new high-throughput methods to accelerate identification of novel chemical inhibitors of pioneer and other transcription factors. Dr. Jason Carroll. Professor Charles French Constant. Charles French Constant, Professor of Medical Neurology at the University of Edinburgh, combines expertise both as a neuroscientist and clinical geneticist. He has made fundamental and sustained contributions that underpin much contemporary research in developmental and regenerative neuroscience. He has characterized neural stem cells and the roles of myelin and integrins in CNS regeneration, particularly applied to two important clinical conditions, multiple sclerosis and leukodystrophy. In defining the key cellular mechanisms involved in the signaling between oligodendrocytes and axons during remyelination, he has proposed mechanism-based approaches to therapy currently undergoing clinical trial. Professor French Constant has taken on several senior leadership roles, demonstrating his unusually broad grasp of topics that span laboratory to clinical research. Professor Charles French Constant. Professor David Fitzpatrick. David Fitzpatrick is a professor and group leader and section head at the MRC Human Genetics Unit in Edinburgh. His research interests lie in the identification of genetic causes of serious developmental disorders. Able to adopt and adapt new technologies, he has made a series of seminal discoveries based on the structural disruption of the genome. His clinical observational skills led him to identify and integrate novel genes into interactive networks implicated in chromatin organization as underlying causes of the genetically heterogeneous multisystem Cornelia de Lange syndrome. These findings have clarified diagnoses and recurrence risks for families, and clinical guidelines based on his cohort studies have improved disease management. Professor David Fitzpatrick. Professor Richard Gilbertson. Richard Gilbertson is Professor of Oncology at the Cancer Research UK Cambridge Institute. A paediatric oncology clinical scientist, he has pioneered the field of cross-species genomics, specifically using data generated from patient samples to design accurate mouse models directly informing understanding of the biology and treatment of paediatric brain tumors. Armed with knowledge gained from his studies of brain tumors, Gilbertson has also generated organism-wide maps of cancer risk across all organs. He demonstrated for the first time that a perfect storm of stem cell activity, mutation, and tissue damage govern the risk of tumorigenesis in all tissues. These data have had profound implications for understanding the origin and prevention of all cancers. Professor Richard Gilbertson. Professor Linda Greensmith. Linda Greensmith is the head of the UCL Sobel Department of Motor Neuroscience and Movement Disorders. She is recognized and widely respected internationally for her basic and translational work on neuromuscular disorders, especially motor neuron disease. She has world-class expertise in both small animal models of disease, including in vivo electrophysiology, and in cutting-edge cellular and molecular biology. She deploys these skills to understand basic mechanisms of motor neuron injury and then to develop innovative neuroprotective and regenerative approaches to therapy. Professor Greensmith is an inspirational role model with a strong track record of translating basic science into experimental medicine. Professor Linda Greensmith. Professor Steve Halligan. Steve Halligan, head of the Center for Medical Imaging at UCL, is one of the best-known academic clinical radiologists in the UK. His work focuses on the therapeutic impact of high-technology imaging platforms in clinical practice. While an NHS consultant, his work on MRI and pelvic sepsis impacted directly on patient care, and subsequent work at UCL proved him able to deliver large, multi-center, pragmatic, randomized trials of imaging within the NHS. Professor Halligan is President-elect of the European Society of Gastrointestinal and Abdominal Radiology and a passionate advocate for capacity building in academic radiology. Professor Steve Halligan. Professor Francesca Happe. Francesca Happe is director of the MRC Social, Genetic and Developmental Psychiatry Center at King's College. She is one of the most highly cited researchers in the field of autism research. An outstandingly good communicator, she has been very active in fostering the public understanding of science. Her specific research contributions include the development of an advanced test of theory of mind, the development of the notion of weak central coherence as a feature of autism, and the demonstration that this reflects a cognitive style rather than a cognitive impairment. She has pioneered the use of functional neuroimaging to interrogate the brain as a basis of social cognition in individuals with autism. Professor Francesca Happe. Professor Allison Holmes. Allison Holmes is Professor of Infectious Diseases at Imperial College London and Director of the NIHR Health Protection Research Unit in Healthcare-Associated Infections and Antimicrobial Resistance. A world-leading expert in the field of infectious disease and antimicrobial resistance, her research has been cited in the UK Antimicrobial Resistance Strategy. She has twice been called as an expert witness by the House of Commons Science and Technology Select Committee. Her work is an exemplar of the applied research in healthcare delivery and how patient-focused research can have a powerful and rapid impact on the health of patients and implications for the NHS as a whole. Professor Allison Holmes. Dr. Roman Hovorka. Roman Hovorka is a mathematician and physiological modeler at Cambridge University. His work spearheaded the medical and social acceptance of the artificial pancreas as a novel treatment paradigm. His studies were the first to evaluate the artificial pancreas during free living conditions in adults and young people. Dr. Hovorka's patents, mathematical modeling, and decision support software have been licensed and commercialized by industry, and he continues to working with industry on advanced artificial pancreas systems to improve insulin delivery and glucose sensing components. He has worked nationally and internationally with regulatory, professional, and advisory bodies on applying computational models as well as on safety aspects of diabetes technology. Dr. Roman Hovorka. Dr. Matthew Hurls. Matthew Hurls is Senior Group Leader of Human Genetics at the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute in Cambridge. He is known for his innovation within the field of population and human genomics, allowing him to be one of the first truly population genomic researchers of this century. His work to characterize structural variation in the human genome paved the way for his leadership on the Deciphering Developmental Disorders study, looking for germline mutations in more than 12,000 children with undiagnosed developmental disorders. This important study was the proof of principle for the rare diseases component of the Genomics England program. Dr. Matthew Hurls. Professor Tracy Hussell. Tracy Hussell, Director of the Manchester Collaborative Centre for Inflammation Research, epitomizes excellence in translation of innovative basic science concepts into patient benefit. She is at the forefront of successful interactions between academia, industry, and the NHS, attracting funding for discovery science leading to new therapeutic strategies in a number of areas of clinical unmet need. Her innovative thinking has led to the concept of structural regulation of innate immunity in health and its prolonged alterations in acute and chronic lung disease. This concept now being translated into improved understanding of the role of disorders in the skin, gastrointestinal tract, and joint. Professor Tracy Hussell. Professor Arthur Kaiser. Arthur Kaiser is Professor of Gastroenterology at Cambridge University. A brilliant academic gastroenterologist, his research has provided fundamental new insight into the mechanisms of inflammatory bowel diseases, including Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Through the creation and use of complex genetic models, Professor Kaiser discovered that dysregulation of fundamental cell intrinsic processes, including the unfolded protein response, can cause inflammatory bowel disease, thus defining a key pathway of Crohn's disease pathogenesis. He has built on these mechanistic insights by investigating factors that may trigger disease in genetically susceptible individuals, opening up new avenues for therapy. Professor Arthur Kaiser. Professor Jonathan Knowles. Jonathan Knowles, Executive Chairman at Umicore, has had a profound impact on biomedicine through his career. Through leading the Glaxo Institute for Molecular Biology in Geneva for 6 years and as President of Global Research at Hoffmann La Roche in Basel, Professor Knowles' contributions to industry, particularly in creating opportunities for industry and academia to work together, have had a profound effect on biomedicine in the UK. His leadership in industry of the stratified medicine agenda has become a major component of thinking in modern biomedical science, and he is currently executive chairman of two of the fastest growing biotech companies in the UK. Professor Jonathan Knowles. Professor Philip Manny. Philip Manny is Professor of Mathematical Biology at the University of Oxford. He is an internationally distinguished applied mathematician who has made substantial and sustained contributions to both biology and medicine. He has played a very significant role within the UK in fostering a strong school of mathematical biology within the university sector, where he has been an important academic leader and mentor to many young individuals at the interface of maths and medicine. The breadth of Professor Manny's contributions is remarkable, having spanned developmental biology, systems biology, host pathogen interactions, tumor biology, multiscale modeling, intestinal crypt morphogenesis, and spatial patterning. Professor Philip Manny. Professor Giovanna Malucci. Giovanna Malucci is Professor of Clinical Neurosciences at the University of Cambridge. She is an internationally acclaimed leader in the field of neurodegeneration. She is renowned for her pioneering, paradigm-shifting research on pathogenic mechanisms of protein misfolding diseases and for her translational vision for new therapeutic strategies. She has made fundamental contributions to the rapidly growing field of protein misfolding disorders. Her innovative approach is evidenced by her discovery, using the paradigm of structural synaptic plasticity in hibernation, of a new family of proteins which can be manipulated for neuroprotection. The translational potential of Professor Malucci's work for treatment of dementia makes her one of the outstanding contributors to medical science worldwide. Professor Giovanna Malucci. Okay. We need more carpet at the front. Professor Derek Mann. Derek Mann, Chair of Hepatology at Newcastle University, has made a series of seminal discoveries that help describe mechanisms by which liver disease progresses to cirrhosis. He led the studies resulting in the discovery of angiotensin and serotonin pathways that become deranged in liver disease, and translated this work to a clinical study of losartan in fatty liver disease. Professor Mann's leadership is demonstrated by 10 years directorship of the Newcastle Fibrosis Group, which is considered world-leading. He has an outstanding record in supporting and mentoring his trainees, and has recently appointed Dean of Research for the Faculty of Medicine at Newcastle. Professor Derek Mann. Professor Hugh Marcus. Hugh Marcus is Professor of Stroke Medicine at the University of Cambridge. An academic clinician with an international reputation in stroke research, his work has provided key advances in the understanding of stroke mechanisms which have important therapeutic implications. His work in cerebral small vessel disease made important contributions to our understanding of why some patients develop dementia. He has led major international co-consortia which have transformed our understanding of the genetics of stroke. Professor Marcus has chaired the UK Stroke Forum, which brings together all bodies representing stroke within the UK, and has played a major role in transforming clinical stroke services, particularly within London. Professor Hugh Marcus. Professor Susan Mitchie. Susan Mitchie, Professor of Health Psychology at University College London, is an acknowledged leader in using methods and theories from behavioural science to improve health and well-being. She has applied this science to the implementation of research findings into policy and practice, which requires behavioural change at many levels. Her work on the psychological impact of genetic testing has brought methodological and theoretical rigour to the field of understanding behavioural change and developing behavioural interventions. She has developed innovative tools and frameworks, such as the Behaviour Change Wheel, which are foundational to the public health work of NICE and are widely used across government departments, both in the UK and internationally. Professor Susan Mitchie. Professor Jill Pell. Jill Pell is Director of the Institute of Health and Wellbeing at the University of Glasgow. Jill has championed novel approaches to population health research through the use of e-health records and record linkage. Her work on tobacco control is world-leading. She led the research evaluating the impact of the Scottish smoke-free legislation on health that demonstrated benefits in terms of reduced rates of myocardial infarction, childhood asthma, and pregnancy complications, which has had a significant global impact. Her pioneering programme of research linking Scotland-wide health and education data has importantly resulted in improved governance of and access to education data for health-related research. Professor Jill Pell. Dr. Rabinder Prajar. Rab Prajar is VP Head of Epinova Epigenetics, an outstanding scientist who is a world-leading figure in the emerging field of epigenetics drug discovery and a very active leader at the industry-academic interface, helping to advance medical science. His high-impact translational science and the molecules his group have discovered have made him the partner of choice for 2 leading academic laboratories. His work is widely recognised as a key contribution to the field. In addition to this, he is very active in promoting science and is leading the EU Innovative Medicines Initiative Immunology Strategic Governance Group. Dr. Rabinder Prajar. Professor David Roblin. David Roblin, Chief Operating Officer at the Francis Crick Institute in London, is a clinician who has led some of the most significant initiatives in medical science in the UK, including substantial contributions to pharmaceutical R&D. At Pfizer, he led an annual investment of £850 million with 7,000 staff in the UK, Singapore, Brussels and Milan, working from R&D to commercial implementation. Dr. Roblin's contributions to the Crick have been extraordinary. Not only has he coordinated the activities of the new institute over 4 sites, led the creation of the institute's corporate functions, and overseen construction of the new laboratory on budget, but his industrial experience has informed the formulation of the Crick's distinctive translational strategy. Dr. David Roblin. Professor Jamie Rossjohn. Jamie Rossjohn is a National Health and Medical Research Australia Fellow at Monash University. He has retained substantial links with UK-based science since embarking on investigations in Australia, particularly those with Cardiff University. This includes work on natural killer cell receptors, HLA-linked drug hypersensitivities, innate-like T-cell recognition of vitamin B metabolites, and autoimmunity and MHC-mediated immunity. Professor Rossjohn has consistently fostered collaborations across the UK, spanning from his early work on pore-forming toxins and his pioneering work on lipid-mediated immunity. He routinely acts as a reviewer for the Wellcome Trust and the MRC. Professor Jamie Rossjohn. Professor Owen Sansom. Owen Sansom is Deputy Director of the CRUK Beatson Institute in Glasgow. An internationally respected researcher working on genetic mouse models of cancer, he has made remarkable contributions to our understanding of epithelial biology and the complex, tissue-specific actions of genes involved in tumorigenesis. Professor Sansom has also produced important data on the normal functions of the intestinal tumor suppression, APC, which may have implications for regenerative medicine. He is generous with his time and sharing of resources, and his collaborative spirit has been key to creating a world-leading pancreatic team in Glasgow, bringing together clinicians and academics. Professor Owen Sansom. Professor Stephen Scott. Stephen Scott is Director of the National Academy for Parenting Research at King's College London. Stephen is a world leader in bringing together highly rigorous science and creative skilled clinical work in the field of parenting interventions. His research showed, with randomized controlled trials, that treatments shown to be effective in university clinical settings could be made to work in the community, even when this involved socially disadvantaged ethnic minorities. This mix of top-class science and excellent clinical work applied also to his research with foster children, which showed that many of the treated children were able to develop new, secure attachments. Professor Stephen Scott. don't need to rush. Professor Michael Seckel. Michael Seckel is Professor of Molecular Cancer Medicine at Imperial College London. He has become the recognised international leader in the field of gestational trophoblastic disease, which affects 200,000 women worldwide each year. His work has provided fundamental new information about the disease behaviour, its treatment, and substantially improved survival rates. Professor Seckel has tirelessly disseminated knowledge, and his contributions continue to be adopted internationally, thus facilitating the establishment of new GTD centres across the globe. He has also developed a new national NHS service for malignant ovarian germ cell tumours and leads the EU Rare Gynae Cancer Initiative for Eurocan. Professor Michael Seckel. Professor Robin Shattuck, Professor of Mucosal Infection and Immunity at Imperial College, London. Robin Shattuck is an international leader in the field of mucosal immunology and HIV prevention. He has been a pioneer in working out how to use both drugs and passive antibodies to prevent HIV transmission, first showing that they work in models in vitro and then translating to clinical trials. Translation of this work requires extensive international collaborations, and he's been a leader in establishing and supporting networks, including Europres. This has led to the recent establishment of the European AIDS Vaccine Initiative, where he is directing a program of research across 23 institutions. Professor Robin Shattuck. Professor Kate Storey. Kate Storey is Chair of Neurodevelopment at the University of Dundee. She is internationally recognised for substantial contributions to understanding nervous system development. She discovered that opposing FGF and retinoic acid signalling controlled differentiation onset in the embryonic body axis. Kate has pioneered live imaging techniques to monitor neuroepithelial cell behaviour, leading to the discovery of a new form of cell subdivision which regulates delamination of newborn neurons. Her work on neural lineage commitment has broad implications for human disease, nervous system repair and regeneration, as well as metastatic cell migration. Professor Kate Storey. Professor Ryan Tooze. Ryan Tooze is Director of the Institute of Cardiovascular and Medical Sciences at the University of Glasgow. She is one of the world's foremost clinical scientists in hypertension and vascular medicine, recognised internationally for her innovative translational research. Her major contributions have been in vascular biology of redox signalling and NOx enzymes, and their potential as novel druggable targets. Her discoveries contributed to new therapeutic applications in hypertension and renal disease, as well as a first-to-man clinical study in diabetic neuropathy. Her studies have opened up new strategies to target adipocyte-derived aldosterone in obesity-related cardiovascular disease. Professor Ryan Tooze. Professor Brian Walker. Brian Walker is head of the BHF Centre for Cardiovascular Science at the University of Edinburgh. He is a clinician scientist whose prolific research on glucocorticoids reveals novel insights into pathology and pharmacology of steroid action, encompassing epidemiology, genetics, and integrative physiology. He has a successful record in drug discovery and its translation, including progressing an 11-beta HSD1 inhibitor from chemistry to first in man. He has edited 3 editions of the iconic Davison's Textbook of Medicine and led the establishment of the unique Edinburgh Clinical Academic track for run-through training of clinician scientists. Professor Brian Walker. Professor Christine Watson. Christine Watson, Professor of Cell and Cancer Biology at the University of Cambridge, is internationally recognized as one of the most highly respected mammary gland biologists. She has made seminal contributions to understanding the developmental biology of the mammary gland and how this is perturbed in breast cancer. Her studies on mammary stem cells and regulation of cell death during mammary involution have been world-leading. She is Secretary General of the International Association for Breast Cancer Research, overseeing global conferences with clinicians, basic scientists, and patient advocates. Professor Watson actively engages the public and school children in the medical sciences and is a member of the Nuffield Council on Bioethics. Professor Christine Watson. Professor Robert Wilkinson. Robert Wilkinson is a welcome senior clinical fellow and senior group leader at the Francis Crick Institute. His achievements have been in understanding the human immune response to tuberculosis, especially in the context of HIV co-infection, and on translation of knowledge into novel intervention strategies. The latter half of his career, to date, has been spent in South Africa, where tuberculosis is a leading cause of death. He has worked on both innate and acquired immune responses, notably on the anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial functions of vitamin D in tuberculosis, which has led to multiple clinical trials. Professor Robert Wilkinson. Professor Thomas Williams. Tom Williams is chair in hemoglobinopathology research at Imperial College London. He is a paediatrician and global leader in hemoglobin research who has made outstanding contributions to the understanding of human genetic resistance to malaria. He co-conceived and leads the largest democratic health surveillance system in Africa and runs an active program of genetic research throughout the region. Professor Williams' work has led directly to changes in international policy regarding the prevention and management of bacterial infections and malaria in African children with sickle cell disease. This has played a major role in improving the profile of this condition on the international health agenda. Professor Tom Williams. So unfortunately, a number of the fellows elected weren't actually, for a number of reasons, able to be here today. So it falls to me to read out their names and have a round of applause. We hope they may join us in future years. So this is Professor James Berkeley, Professor Azza Ghani, Professor Gregory Hannon, Professor Matthew Hoptoff, Professor Susan Lee, and Professor Dame Margaret Whitehead. I'm also very pleased to say that fellows who couldn't make it on the year they were elected, we have 4 such fellows here today, and that gives us a chance to read their citations and welcome them to the stage. So I'm just going to do that now. So Professor Mark Emberton. Mark Emberton is Professor of Interventional Oncology at University College London. Surgically trained, he develops, administers, and evaluates image-guided therapies to patients, blurring the boundaries between radiology, interventional oncology, and surgery. His work to position interventional science as the translational arm of bioengineering has led to a dramatic shortening of the time it takes to transition from prototype to clinical benefit. Professor Emberton is a gifted clinician who provides tertiary services to the nation, a valued teacher, and an inspirational academic leader. His international profile is amongst the highest within the disciplines of urology and surgery. Professor Mark Emberton. Dr. Fiona Marshall. Fiona Marshall is Chief Scientific Officer at Heptares Therapeutics Limited and widely recognized for her innovation and entrepreneurship. Her work has contributed to the scientific understanding of the mechanism of action and role of G-protein coupled receptors across the breadth of different receptor classes. GPCRs are major drug targets across a broad range of therapeutic areas, and understanding their subunit interactions and ligand binding activity is crucial for accelerating novel drug discovery and development. Fiona's work has been conducted in industry in Glaxo and Glaxo Wellcome, and subsequently Heptares Therapeutics, a leading drug discovery biotechnology company where she is a founding CSO. Dr. Fiona Marshall. Professor John Mcmurray. John Mcmurray is Professor of Medical Cardiology at the University of Glasgow and one of the foremost academic cardiologists in the UK and internationally. His leadership of game-changing clinical studies from early mechanistic hypothesis generation to large international trials have led to fundamental changes in clinical practice in heart failure and other coronary artery diseases. His research has led to mechanistic insights into atrial fibrillation and cardiovascular consequences of diabetes and chronic kidney disease. His research interests include cardiovascular epidemiology and health services research, including socio-economic determinants of health outcomes and health economics. He is a major thought leader for revolutionary clinical endeavors and an undisputed leader in academic cardiology worldwide. Professor John Mcmurray. Professor Sir John Strang. John Strang is Professor of Addictions at King's College London and is the nation's leading academic in the field of clinical addictions. For the last 2 decades, he has led the National Addiction Centre, one of the most productive addictions research groups in Europe, leading major seminal trials which have changed policy and treatment. He has served as Special Advisor to the Chief Medical Officer for 5 consecutive terms, chaired the DH Expert Committee on Drug Misuse, and has served as Commissioner of the UK Drug Policy Commission. He has engaged widely with the public and leads addictions education in the UK. Professor Sir John Strang.
Well, may I say that we're honoured to welcome the new fellows into the Academy, and you're not off the hook. We very much hope that we'll keep you engaged in the activities of the Academy as we move forward. Before closing this bit, can I give a very heartfelt thank you to Philippa for managing this process so skillfully and managing the reading of citations so eloquently, and to Russell Crandon in the office for his support. Could you give them a round of applause? Now, before releasing you for the tea break, I have 2 brief announcements to make. The first is that today marks the end of the term of office of Chris Day as the Academy Vice President Clinical. And I think we should just mark that moment. Chris has been a fantastic support to the Academy during his time as Vice President. Most recently, he was the lead officer on our recent report, Best Evidence Project. He was chair of the review group for both the sources of evidence for assessing the safety, efficacy, and effectiveness of medicines, and the enhancing the use of scientific evidence to judge the potential benefits and harms of medicines. Probably our most wordy titles in the history of the Academy. Staff have all commented on what a pleasure he was to work with on this project, and say that they would not have got to the end of the project without his support. Separately from the Evidence Project, he's been an excellent chair of a cross-Academies roundtable on the Research Excellence Framework, and was integral in driving the forum clusters work and follow-up activities, which formed an important part of our response to the life sciences strategy. Chris has supported many of the Academy's corporate events, regularly travelling around the country to attend such events. He's been a great addition to the officers group, an epitome, I would say, of sagacity, calmness, and common sense. He's renowned among staff for his short email replies, which are always signed off with cheers, and you can imagine raising a glass of Newcastle Brown as he does so. Chris, would you like to come to the stage?
Thank you very much, Robert. All I will say, as you would expect, it's been an enormous privilege to be one of the officers of this society. The staff that you work with are incredible, and the scientists and clinicians that I've come across being part of council twice, again, have been inspirational. I've seen the Academy grow over the 9 years that I've been involved with it now, and the impact that it's now having, the influence that it's having, the diversity that you've seen in the fellows and the officers, I think is a real testimony to the drive and strategy of John Tuck that I worked for a while, and now Robert. And I think I leave the Academy in really good hands, and delighted to hand over to my great friend and colleague Paul Stewart as the next Clinical Vice President. Thank you, Robert.
And then the final announcement is of the next Vice President non-clinical, because Martin Humphreys steps down towards the end of this year. So, start of this calendar year, we formed a search committee to oversee the process for electing the new Basic Science Vice President. and we sought nominations from the fellowship. The candidates met with the search committee in May, and that led to a recommendation being made to council just a few days ago. And I'm delighted to announce the next Vice President, non-clinical, will be Professor Fiona Watt, who's a distinguished stem cell researcher, and we look forward to working with Fiona. There's one more appointment that is in the process of being made, and that is for the next Vice President International. It's not that George is leaving us just yet, but he will be doing in the middle of next year. And that announcement I should hope to make towards the end of the summer. The final and most important announcement we've been waiting for is that tea is now served in the foyer, and then caffeinated, we invite you back to enjoy listening to some science from 4 of our newly elected fellows. Thank you very much.